Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University, and welcome to Outrider 11. Why examiners are interested in your references, referencing, and citations. This is the end of our Joanne trilogy. Joanne asked that I'd explore citation politics. Our first instalment of the trilogy investigated how we as individual scholars think about citations and make decisions about who we read and who we reference. The gig last week, Mandalorian Citations, explored this is the way in which our particular academic disciplines, paradigms, subjects and theories configure appropriate and inappropriate references. And we looked at all sorts of things like the ranking of journals and how gatekeeping operates in our disciplines. And we finish really with the most important part of our discussion today, and that is what your examiners care about when they're looking at your references and your citations. Because, to be frank with you, whatever we may think, whatever our vibe may be, whatever we think, I don't like that person, that researcher is not a good human being, whatever we personally think is probably not hugely important when we come to the examination of a PhD. You see, even more importantly, when we make individual decisions about who not to incorporate as a researcher, we're held accountable for those decisions. And so we need to put the problem into the work so the examiner understands why particular names and ideas that they expected are magically or seemingly not in this thesis. Now, one of the weird challenges of being in a job like mine is that students talk endlessly about what their supervisors and what their advisors are doing wrong over and over again. The whole energy is, my supervisor. And when I talk to supervisors, almost all of the conversations I have with supervisors are what their students are doing wrong. Now, both students and supervisors are actually missing the point here. The one thing I can guarantee to you is neither students nor supervisors will be examining your PhD. So what your supervisor thinks, what your peers, what your friends think, what other students think, really at the end of the day, that is irrelevant. With all the focus that exists on the intense relationship between a supervisor and a student, we're actually missing the point. Therefore, what you think and feel, what your supervisor thinks and feels about a particular researcher or a particular way of doing research is a lot less important than what your examiner thinks. So at the end of the Joanne trilogy, I'm finishing really with the most important conversation we need to have. What your examiners are looking for in your referencing, your references and your citations. Now, when I do my 10 drafts with my students, so my students complete their full first draft, and then before we submit it to examiners, we go through iterations of 10 drafts. And in just about every one of those drafts, I'm looking for different things and testing and checking different things in the references. So we're spending so much time as a supervisor, as a student, looking at references and referencing because your examiner will spend so much time with your references and your referencing. And I always say to my students, and I hope this is useful, any minute that you spend on references and referencing is a great minute. So I know you might be a bit tired in the afternoon or at night and you're going, oh, look, I'll just do some referencings. There's no just there. When you are working with references, that is an important, crucial job to do with your time. So references, referencing, your bibliography and footnotes, if that's your particular discipline, all these discussions matter a great deal. So this Outrider will show you that references aren't just references for your examiner. They really are the key first and final steps that we assess you and assess if we're going to pass this PhD. So when we are checking references, we're also verifying a series of characteristics and behaviours and ethical judgments in the work that you have produced. So I know that references can appear a bit pedantic, or a bit difficult, or a bit dull, like, why am I doing this? But I cannot stress to you enough how important references are to the examination process. And I'll tell you why. When I examine PhDs, and when most of us examine PhDs, we start reading that PhD at the back. So I start examining a doctorate, a research master's, with the reference list or with the bibliography. And to be frank with you, I know if that thesis is going to pass or fail when I read that reference list. I know what I'm going to see from simply reading the bibliography. So let me provide some insights for you as an examiner about when examiners come to this process and we're looking at your referencing, we're looking at your citations, what are we actually looking for? And I'm going to give you the 5 hints, the things to think about and know that we as examiners care deeply about, and we use your references as a pretty elegant proxy to assess your ability. So here we go. 1. When I'm reading your references, I'm checking that academic literacies are in place. I know it makes students crazy when supervisors and peer reviewers and examiners explore and focus on your writing, your grammar, your sentence construction, your vocabulary, and yes, your references. But the reason we are assessing vocabulary and references and so forth is because we are checking if foundational academic literacies are in place. And a key component of academic literacies involves referencing. So what am I looking for? The first thing I'm looking for is a correct referencing style. The second thing I'm looking for is consistency. If I see a student moving between different modes of references and referencing, then I know we are in trouble. So I'm looking for consistency and I'm looking for accuracy. If you're using in-text modes of referencing, or if you're using footnote modes and modalities, be accurate, and please check your references. Every minute you spend on a reference is a good minute. Next, make sure that everything that you reference in your chapter is in your reference list or bibliography. Examiners start by doing spot checks. So, right, there's a reference. Is it in the reference list bibliography at the end? Spot check. And if we find that 5 or more references are not in your reference list or bibliography, we really start to worry, and the spot checks become something much more serious. So please make sure everything that you reference is in your reference list, and do not rely on the software to do the job for you. Then the next crucial one is really make sure that your paraphrasing is accurate. This is becoming increasingly important. Please ensure that your paraphrasing is paraphrasing. It's not actually plagiarism. So help yourself. Use the in-text and use all sorts of text matching software to prove that, yep, that is a paraphrase. I haven't been lazy or slack in my cutting and pasting, and actually that paraphrase is really plagiarism. Now, it is incredibly important through your candidature that you use text matching software, not as a punishment, but as a diagnostic to just prove time and time again that you know what you're doing, and when you are paraphrasing, it is actually a paraphrase. And make sure, if your discipline enables quotations, that your quotations are strong, and once more, they are accurate. So referencing in this first tip is a proxy. It is a proxy that you are in control of information, that you possess information literacy, that you are demonstrating that you control references rather than your referencing controls you. 2, research and academic integrity. Does anything matter more than research and academic integrity? Question mark. And the answer is no. We all have a right to information, right? Information is integral to the very configuration of citizenship. But documenting the path from information to knowledge, that's the job of a scholar. That is your job, to move information into knowledge. Now, when the right to information and the responsibilities to knowledge align, then that is academic and research integrity. In a PhD, you must display, not assume, you must display academic integrity, you must display research integrity. You must be honest, you must be trustworthy, you must be responsible with the information that you are deploying. You have to demonstrate that you have activated professional and proper engagements with academic literacy, so your referencing is correct, but also research ethics, that you have behaved ethically. That cannot be assumed. You have to display and prove, verify your ethics. But then also show that you have information literacy, that with rigour and precision, you're able to overtly demonstrate the pathway from information to knowledge. Yeah. So what does this mean? At its most basic, it means that you acknowledge the work of others. What have the scholars and citizens before us done? And be clear on that. And then be clear, the next stage, how you are deploying that work to develop your own interpretation. You are understanding the cost and the consequences of the cut and pasting culture, and you are addressing the consequences of digitisation with precision and care, ethics and decency. Okay, you understand what happens when you make a decision to modify graphs or images or particular photographs and use that in a different way, so you understand how to use mixed mode materials with ethics. And at its most basic, you understand how to use a caption. So remember, if you take a caption that's the original caption and use it originally without the quotation marks, that's actually plagiarism. So you understand something as basic as how captions move and how you demonstrate originality in the deployment of tables and so forth. You also understand what I describe as the zombie of information literacy. You understand self-plagiarism. So when you reference well, you demonstrate, remember I'm using very active verbs here, you demonstrate to examiners that you have information literacy, you have research literacy, and you have the knowledge from your disciplines, but you understand how knowledge exists in institutions like universities and how that knowledge can and should move. So as you can see, this is about safeguarding your reputation today, but also your reputation in the future. While you're doing a PhD, and I understand this, while you're doing a PhD, everything is sort of about the PhD. Everything that happens in your life is about the PhD. But the problem you've got is the decisions that you're making today in this PhD program have profound consequences for the rest of your life. David Robinson, former Vice-Chancellor at Monash University, stepped down in 2002 after allegations of plagiarism that occurred 30 years earlier. So he lost his job, he lost some friends, he lost his reputation. As only happens with Australian Vice-Chancellors, though, this story does have a very interesting ending. He was promoted to the chairman of the Victorian Education Research Network that was run by Victorian universities after he walked away from the Monash job. Only in Australia. So remember that these issues about research integrity, intentional or otherwise, will follow you through your career. Think, learn and reference with intentionality. Examiners are looking to see that you understand academic integrity and research integrity, knowing that knowledge must always be situated respectfully in its current context. Referencing therefore confirms not only that you're a great scholar, but that you respect great scholarship. How important is this? 3, you grasp the disciplinary literature. Now, Joanne is making and initiated this series to make a great point, and I think she's made a great point for all of us to think about. And that is, we may want to make independent choices about a scholar like Heidegger. But the trouble is, you might want to go, well, look, I'm very uncomfortable with citing a scholar that has any engagements with Nazism. I think we all understand that, like, right on, yeah, great. The issue is, though, just you making that decision and then getting on with your thesis is not going to be useful for your examiners. You need to explain these ethical decisions through the thesis so that your examiner can follow you on your citation journey. And if you are going to leave out a key scholar, then you need to put that problem into the work and you need to explain why you've left out that scholar. Now, remember my old line, what we don't talk about is actually more important than what we do talk about. References show that you understand the literature in your field. You respect your field. You respect your discipline. This is a major issue for examiners. Do you hold an understanding of the disciplinary literature? In other words, and this is crucial, if you are going to prove an original contribution to knowledge, are you demonstrating that you understand the contemporary state of knowledge? You can't prove originality if you don't know where knowledge is before you start. Okay. And of course, this capacity to say, I know where knowledge is at, so I can prove originality, that is confirmed through your references. So, as examiners, we are looking for a major suite of references to be included in your thesis. We need to know that you know what you are doing, full stop. All of us as scholars, and these are the assumptions of scholarship, to be frank, all of us as scholars, we look for particular names when we're assessing a PhD, and this can often be called disciplinary literacy. So if you work in a particular discipline, there are particular scholars that are the punctuation of our knowledge system, right? And so we as examiners are going to be looking for those scholars. Now, we need to know that you know what you're talking about, and that's why we're looking for those names that are the punctuation of a discipline. So place your knowledge in context. If you're not going to use those names, you need to use them in the introduction with references to show you know the field, and then explain to the examiner why you're moving on from those references. If you simply ignore them, we're going to think you haven't got control of your disciplinary literacy. 4, here we go, scope and scale. This is huge. Whenever I read examiner reports, and remember, most of us who have been a dean through our career, a dean of graduate studies, we have read thousands of examiner reports, right? And whenever I read the examiner reports that are unfavourable to a student's research, all of those reports share a phrase. And that phrase is, this thesis lacks scope and scale. It's the weirdest thing, when a thesis does very well, and so many theses do well, what excellence looks like is incredibly diverse. But when the thesis is in a difficult space and starts to move down to revise and resubmit and a fail, almost all of those reports share the phrase scope and scale. There's a problem here with scope and scale. And that phrase is code, that the student hasn't read enough and the student hasn't referenced enough. So what the examiner's saying is that this is a really small project, and in fact it's too small for a PhD. I failed a PhD last year. It's a horrible thing to do, horrific, but the reason I failed it was for scope and scale. The bibliography was so thin, so small, it would have failed as an honours thesis. That's how bad this PhD was. It lacked scope and scale. We could not see any expertise that the student had to confirm an original contribution to knowledge because they didn't have grasp of knowledge in the first place. So your references confirm to an examiner that you know what you're doing, that you understand the depth of research and how this thesis fits into the cloth of knowledge. Scope and scale are confirmed by your reference list. And five, currency and contemporary engagement with ideas. Okay, references are required to confirm scope and scale, we know that, but there are specific types of references that we are after that confirm the currency of your research. One of the reasons I beg students to finish their thesis quickly, please finish it quickly, is so that the thesis appears contemporary and rigorous and of its time. You see, the difficulty with a long candidature, and there's lots of them, but one of the great difficulties with the long candidature is that your references start to appear really dated. So, 2020, when you're in 2021, might have seemed really, really edgy and current, but 2020 in 2025 appears a bit tired. Yeah. So what is original and important, edgy today may not be in 2025. In fact, will not be in 2025. And that's why these long candidatures are disastrous to students. If you're proving originality, you are proving originality in your present, in current knowledge systems. So please, 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 just as a trick, make sure you've got tons of references from the last year. So the year in which you are submitting the thesis, make sure there are plenty of references in your intro, in your conclusion, all the way through. When examiners see references from the year in which they're examining that thesis, we all relax. It's very, very easy to summon that material too, by the way. It's never been easier to ensure that this current material is part of your thesis, and Google Scholar can really help you. So look at the key researchers in your field. And in the year that you're submitting, what have they written? And then look at the key research in your field. And then who has cited that research in the year you are submitting. And examiners, we relax when we see that. We relax when we see that you're on top of the material. Okay, so as you can see, colleagues, references are never really just references. Citations are never just citations. References signify your effort, your work, your rigour. References confirm that you respect ethics and that you have demonstrated research integrity and academic integrity. References also confirm the quality and the currency of your research. References are powerful. They are enabling of your doctorate. Now, Joanne, what a blessing you have been to us. I thank you so much for this suggestion so early in our Outrider session to think about citation politics. So we started with you, the decisions that you make. We've inserted those citations into the requirements of your discipline, and we finished off by thinking about examiners, what examiners are after when they see your reference list. And Joanne, thank you so much for this suggestion. You inspire me every single day, and I know that you inspire others. I wish you all love, light, and peace. Tea out.